healthcare for them.
When individuals win, companies win, because companies are made of individuals.
Bitcoin or BTC, $1 trillion CAP, don't sleep on cryptocurrency, just make some money while you sleep.
Reimagine who you are, who you want to be, and get through it. You got to get through it. At the end of the day, you always got to find a way to win. Hello, everybody. Happy New Year, and welcome to the Winner's Circle. My name is Daphne Jones. In case you all don't remember, my background, I was a CIO at Johnson & Johnson and other companies. I have been author of Win When They Say You Won't, my book that launched 2 years ago. The CEO of the board curators. I'm now the host of the Winner's Circle Live, a monthly podcast. This podcast is not where we just talk about success. We really study winning. And it's not the highlight reel version. It's not the overnight success myth, right? We talk about the discipline, the decisions, and the sacrifices that people participate in and people prevail in. So every month we bring you conversations with leaders who are winning in their field and who are, more importantly, building systems and other things that help people also win. And today's guest, Larry Jones, fits that description in a real way. Larry is a purpose-driven technology executive. He used to be a CIO who has spent more than 30 years, I think it's been 35 years, at the intersection of innovation, healthcare, and leadership. As the CIO at Johnson & Johnson, he helped shape digital transformation and is now at the helm of global healthcare strategy at Microsoft. Microsoft, one of the biggest, most powerful platforms on the planet. But this discussion today is not about his title. It's about what does it take to win in an industry where, quite frankly, technology decisions can help us determine our life, our death, if we have access to healthcare, and if we have equity around healthcare. So we want to know, who is healthcare technology actually serving, and how do we measure winning when lives and not profits are on the line? So if you're a founder, an executive, a technologist, a healthcare professional, doesn't matter who you are, if you just want to learn how to win with impact, this conversation is for you. So welcome to the Winner's Circle. Let's get into it. So first, without going any further, I want to make sure if you want to have any questions for Larry Jones, if you want to ask questions, please, this time is going to go fast. So do hashtag Ask Larry, and we will do questions until about 12:40, till 40 minutes to 1. And then the Winner's Circle Perspective is my video series, so I ask you to subscribe. So without further ado, let me bring Larry on, and who is already on. He stays on. Welcome, welcome, Larry, to the Winner's Circle. I want to make sure we get you.
Welcome, Daphne. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfectly well. Great.
Well, thank you for having me. First of all, one, being literally my sister from a J&J perspective, let alone having a last name, it's absolutely a pleasure to be here. A lot of folks, whether you've been in J&J or around our industry, look up to you. So it's an honor and privilege to be here. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Larry. And Larry is a corporate vice president in the healthcare space, and I'm just delighted to have him here. And my nephew is doing basketball, and so Larry committed to helping him. So my nephew is going to call him Uncle Larry. Well, so
Okay.
family. so let's just jump into it, guys. And don't forget, we're going to stop taking questions around 20 minutes to the hour. So please get your questions in. But let's get started. So Larry, you've been at J&J 35 years. And usually after 35 years of anything, people retire, right? But in your case, you moved to Microsoft. And you went from owning healthcare platforms to now powering the platforms that are behind them. What made you think that Microsoft was going to be the good place to land and that it would be able to win in healthcare when so many tech giants have tried to win in healthcare and have failed? Why Microsoft?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get that often. I think for Microsoft, one, I've had previous experience with them in my former roles, and but more importantly than that, I've kind of admired their leadership over time. You think of Satya, and you think of, if anyone's read his biography, he came from pretty humble beginnings, and like you and I, he kind of climbed the IT corporate ladder, so to speak. And the way he leads is very, very different. But the transformation, the reinvention of Microsoft is, is really a part of that story that I thought was not only compelling but interesting. But look, being a part of a company who has probably the world's most famous operating system, let alone productivity suite, has morphed and become which some would say the premier cloud provider, hyperscaler in the world. Behind the firewall, if you will, you see a treasure trove of solutions, whether it's, our AI models and Copilot, and something I lead called Dragon Copilot, which is a ambient-based solution that gives nurse practitioners and physicians the ability to have conversations, with patients and not have to worry about all the administrative burden coming with that interaction, making sure that interaction is secured in the EMR. Azure IoT, which I leverage for robotics and J, keep the stuff they're doing with developers like GitHub, the security platform, all of that bundled, I thought, wow, if there's any company that has all the tentacles to create success in healthcare, and the opportunity, let alone to partner and lead that, with a series of industry partners and a great team, uh, that would be an awesome opportunity. And lastly, I think in my previous role, like you had got to have empathy for these CIOs, right? They're dealing with, I swear, it's a lonely place, literally. You're dealing with tech debt, competitive pressures, and some cases you're dealing in culture or fear of AI and the pace of innovation. You have to stay abreast of everything. There's always the cost pressures. You always got to worry about the cyber threats, workforce, talent management, and just the natural complexity in healthcare is a lot to deal with. So in part, I feel like who better than someone who sat in this role to help those in the role. And that's primarily the only reason I came to Microsoft. Not really interested in titles. I told my team that, not, my feet are flat, not trying to climb a corporate ladder. I just literally seriously wanted to help people in healthcare.
I think that's a great point. You've been in the role, you've been there, done that, got the T-shirt, wrote the book. So now you're on the other side of that. Now you're helping CIOs to be able to scale and accelerate business solutions or healthcare solutions for the organization. So I admire that. And I remember Satyam, the CEO, had said that when he came to Microsoft, Microsoft was a know-it-all company.
Mhm.
And he determined to turn it around. And now Microsoft seeks to be, or maybe already is, a ask it all company. So
Mhm.
you don't pretend to know what the customer needs. You seek to ask the customer about their experiences so you all can give them solutions. Is that right?
That is that is right. Satya is, when
Bad
I
deal.
see his energy in person, it's I don't know if I've seen a leader quite like that outside of maybe Alex, but um, for example, at our kickoff meeting at the beginning of the year, we talked about our desire to be an AI first company, and to say things and articulate a strategy is one thing, but to lean and live into it, and his expectations for all of us to be fluent in AI, even create our own agents. My biggest fear is I'm going to bump into this guy in the cafeteria and he's going to say, "Hey, Jones, what's the latest agent you've developed?" And I'll be like, God, like I haven't had time to do that yet. But his commitment, and he even rewards and recognizes not just how much you sold or the influence, but your own personal development, and being able to witness, how they actually reward people who've gone through training, got their certifications as their own career development.
Yeah,
I think it lends itself to that learn it all sort of organizational culture he's driving.
that's great. And by the way, what is the name of his book? I would like for those that are listening
Oh
to
my God. It's
remember it.
called Satya Nadella. I the name escapes me, but it's basically about the reinvention of Microsoft.
Yeah, Nadella. So those that I can't remember, I think I have it here, but I forgot. So okay, Satya Nadella. Um, that's great to know.
Yeah.
So before you left J&J, you architected what is the Microsoft J&J surgery partnership.
Mhm.
So you negotiated the deal, defined it, designed it, and all that with Microsoft. Now you're on the other side of that. How what is the truth about big tech and healthcare partnerships that became clear after you made the jump? Are there some things that you learned and discovered um, after you joined Microsoft that you didn't see when you were at J&J, and whatever you can share without
Yeah,
you
no, I think it's a excellent and great question. The first thing I struggled as you would probably remark as well is there's a difference between suppliers and partners, right? And I was connected to a lot of suppliers, and most of those tech suppliers I felt were more concerned about where you're going to sign the next agreement
right,
versus what is the core problem you're trying to solve, right? And I think from a partnership perspective, but the relationship does matter. Customers want to know, as I did, that you're literally in the boat with them. You're willing to not only get an agreement, but you're willing to innovate and co-invest with them. That
right,
you align to whatever ambitions they have in the market, either that be for patients, whether that be for their respective companies, or those be financial or innovative. For me, I think the graded appreciation from supplier to partner was having those relationships where a company is proven. Not that startups and young partnerships aren't worthy, but as a CIO, you have to mitigate risk, right? And you have to look at the landscape of influence, and what companies have done in a broader context of delivery. And I also wanted a company partnership that really knew my industry and knew what threats I was working against, and more importantly, my why. And lastly, scaling is a big deal, as you know. You have some great ideas sometimes, but if you can't really scale that idea, through experience design and prototyping, and really understand the entire, especially in healthcare, the entire value chain, or even the customer or patient journey, you're probably working with someone who is just looking to collect their check, and is not really going to, as I said, be in the boat with you.
with
But
you.
I learned there's just an element also of readiness on the customer side. All too often, I think sometimes we put a lot of pressure and think technology is pixie dust. That if I just get some Microsoft and sprinkle it over my business problems and bad business processes, it'll all work. And that's not true. If you're going to partner, you have to come true with yourself on where your company is. Is your leadership team really ready to deal with its real dilemmas of its digital IQ, the growth, and how much talent they have and skills they have to actually achieve what you're trying to do in that partnership, the structure, the culture, the commitment, and more importantly, the governance and expectations. So I think, again, for me now, being kind of on the other side, understanding that shared risk to both image, reputation, outcomes, patients, security, those are not small endeavors. So yeah, it's a, as any relationship, it's a all lean in sort of approach, and I hope that's what I'm doing on behalf of some of my partners now on the technology provider side.
That makes a lot of sense, a ton of sense. And it's like a marriage in a way. Before
Yeah.
you were separated, you didn't know each other or didn't know each other that well. Now you come together and you make a commitment. It's
Mm.
about relationship. You say it's about respect. It's about co-creating the future.
Yeah.
Um, and the culture has got to be aligned. The culture has to be somewhat symbiotic. Otherwise, you'd have a mess on your hands. So I think I appreciate Microsoft because you've got many companies that have different cultures, but Microsoft clearly is doing what it can to make sure that it works with all the companies, regardless of their culture, regardless of their backdrop and expectations. So it takes a tremendous company to be able to be agile like that, to work with so many different companies like J&J, for example. So thank you for that.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So you stayed at J&J for
Yeah,
35 years,
yeah,
which
it's
is
a
just
long
like
time.
2 years younger than my son. He's 38, um, which is rare in today's world. So, was your longevity there, like, would you say that was your competitive advantage because you stayed there so long, or did it ever limit you or keep you in a box where you say this is how the world is because this is what I've known for 35 years?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Look, I think it's a little bit of both. I'm super grateful and blessed to have worked for a flagship company like a J&J. And while I was there, as you know, Daphne, the culture was very family oriented.
Yes,
We often talked about a collection of companies and our charter in various portions of both consumer and healthcare. That commitment was well, it was like we bled J&J red.
yes,
And when you're a part, and I often say this to people I mentor, when you find the opportunity where your professional and your personal meet and they work, stick with it because it's rare. It's rare that you find your passion, you find both where you feel like you personally fit, but you also professionally fit and you can grow. And I've always tried to grow in J&J through learning experiences, being cross sector, working in different regions. Although very introverted, not being afraid to establish relationships across the company. So J&J, as you know, was kind of a myriad of companies within a company. And in that regard, I felt like I learned a lot and experienced so much. And, through my efforts was also rewarded and compensated with other opportunities. However, I do have to say that, you know, the learning experience from, having other sort of adventures, if you will, creates a muscle that I think I kind of underrated, which is adapting. you know, Moving from different companies and different industries creates a resilience that, sometimes it's hard to blend and not everything is going to, be the way you think it should be or the way you're used to, right? Like for me, I left a company where I felt like I knew everyone to a company maybe three times the size where I virtually don't know anyone. And I felt like if I had been a little more courageous in my career, the ability to simulate to new cultures, understand strategies, even the complexities of healthcare outside of the supplier space and getting more into the payer provider space, those are huge like learning opportunities for me. But I think both gives you strengths and skills that really make you test yourself more on the human side as well as the technology side. I know it's rare for most people to say, and I am an old head of being at a company so long. But I do think both can be very rewarding. It's all as you've noted in your previous podcasts. It's all you though. It's what's inside you, and it's what you feel comfortable and confident and courageous in doing. All else will come. But I do have to remark, you have to find that special place. If it's not a company, start your own company, be a founder. Um, but no, I think both absolutely can work, and I think this generation uh, are not really looking to stay at a company 35 years, but maybe owning a company for 35 years.
right, right. I'm finding that the this generation, they need to have the similar skills that you have, systems thinking,
Yeah.
pattern recognition, being able to be agile, having the what we call head, heart, and guts.
Mm,
And it's almost like no matter where you are, all of those things are going to be valuable. You happen to stay long at a company, so you had a lot of stuff in your head from a systems, healthcare, technology perspective. You already had the gut. J&J gives you heart. You
yeah.
think about the patients and the moms and the dads and the kids that your company J&J was about. It gives you the heart, but it also gives you the guts
Mm,
as well to innovate and drive new thinking and new things. So I think J&J grounded you well. So now you can take
uh,
that and hope level up Microsoft, you know, as well. So
Yeah, but I have to say this. There are a lot of people responsible for Larry Jones. When I think of the Zach Lamels, the Ed Hills, the Juan Simpsons, previous bosses I've had, let alone friends that I've had that are still there. I've learned from all of them. And, you know, I think one thing that is more of a earned skill is being able to navigate corporate America. There's no company that, as you know, is perfect, and navigating, especially as a diverse person, um, is something that's really difficult. And most of the people I mentor and speak to are still struggling with, how to navigate. It's not about, as I told some, managing your job or career. It's managing what it is you're trying to achieve overall, and connecting the right dots, especially with people who, quite frankly, are different than you,
Yeah.
and learning from them and applying those to yourself. So I owe my success to a lot of people, much like you and others that are beyond just being in my Rolodex. These are people that are near and dear and teachers to Larry Jones. That is how I got here. And J had a plethora of those people. Some of them are no longer here. Some of them have provided great memories, but they literally taught me how to be my own version of Larry and be a leader at the same time. So I couldn't be more blessed, to have had the opportunity to work with those leaders as well as working in a flagship company.
That's great. Fantastic. And by the way, those everybody's listening, hashtag Ask Larry. We want to know what questions you might have for Larry. So we'll continue the theme about being a person of color and diversity. You have gotten a lot of accolades for your African American leadership in
Mm.
technology, but executive leadership among us in health, in technology, and in healthcare remains. It seems to be largely unchanged. Unchanged.
Mm.
Um, what do you? What's the real barrier? Two-part question. What's the barrier that companies refuse to acknowledge
Mm.
when it comes to diversifying the power and spreading out a little bit among people of color? And what can we do about it? What have
Yeah.
you done about it? What do you think others should do about uh, driving diverse leadership in technology and healthcare?
It's uh, Daphne's bringing the heat now, folks.
Yeah.
It's a good question, right? No, I just got back from J.P. Morgan and had the opportunity to sit at a dinner where we're having a discussion, um, around a number of startups, and I sat next to a gentleman, from the Mayo Clinic, and African American young man who, as soon as when you see people that are like you, the first thing you want to do is go say, "How'd you do it? What's your secret sauce?" Right? Because it's so rare, especially in tech, to find those innovators and connect with them. And it was so engaging that, and we didn't even pay attention to the rest of the table, that people were like, "Hey, I want to talk to you. Are you going to stop talking to this person?" Um, but look, I think you're spot on. I think, and being totally honest, I think diversity has gotten a black eye, both in general and thanks to a lot of disinformation. Um, but I also think companies don't realize that their bias is showing up in ways just by representation, based on some of their policies. But even the bias of, I have a name, Larry Jones, you can't tell by looking at my resume what I am, right? But that's not true for a lot of people. A lot of great resumes, a lot of great skills, a lot of great experiences, I think are missed because people say, "You're technical," and they look at you and think, there's no way you could have been a CIO that long. There's no way for a Fortune 50 company, let alone for a company like Microsoft. And you, Daphne, I know you've had this experience before. When someone walks in a room and meets you and then sees you're a diverse person, they go, "Oh," as if they're looking to see if there's another Larry Jones in the room. No, I am him. I'm he. This is me. And it's not until they get past those biases they realize, like, yeah, this guy actually knows a little something about healthcare and tech. And think those barriers start with leadership, quite frankly, taking a risk, if you want to call it as such, um, on people that maybe don't fit your bias on what a great technologist might look like, either how they dress, or their hairstyle is, where they come from, if they actually English is their second language. Um, what you want to get past is experience, knowledge, and the leadership characteristics that person has to bring. But I'll tell you, it's something that's over and over, and we know as diverse members in a technology group, it's a lonely place, and
Yeah,
more young people are asking key questions. But I think I have two granddaughters. Both of them want to get into healthcare. One wants to be a bioengineer. The other wants to help people with mental health challenges. I want to be that example and say, never mind the numbers, go get it. Go have an impact on healthcare. So um I also recognize that how I show up matters, because people develop their bias based on what they see and what they experience. Doesn't mean I don't let my hair down, so to speak, every once in a while. It doesn't mean that I'm disingenuous. But I recognize that people are going to base their perception of people like me on me. And that's not fair. The world is not fair. And as a person of color, it usually isn't fair. And lastly, I will tell you, um, proving yourself over and over and over again, I know it gets tiring. I also know that each of us in tech or in general, we develop the ability to absorb microaggressions and things like that. Um, I would just tell you that we have a whole bunch of diverse leaders that are going to find a cure for cancer, that are going to help hospitals and payers advance. I'm very, very bullish. What I'm doing is building a network and connecting as much as I can to people who look like me, but also for those who don't look like me, being the representative of a lot of people who are more talented than I am. How I show up means I represent everyone outside of me and behind me. So that's that's what I hope to do.
I remember, Larry, when I was SVP at GE Healthcare, and I walked
Mm.
into a room. I was running late, and I wasn't exactly sure what room I was going to be in. So I walked into the room, and I said, people were sitting there, and I said, "What meeting is this?" Because I didn't have my calendar that I usually carried around, and they said, "This is a private meeting. We're waiting for Daphne Jones." So I could not have been Daphne Jones, because Daphne Jones was the senior vice president at GE Healthcare, and whatever. So I understand they were waiting for another Larry Jones to show up. They were waiting for the real Daphne Jones to show up. So I think I have 100 stories like this in my book, about things that I have gone through, and I know you can write about 100 things that
Mhm,
you have gone through as well. When I think about what we can do, though, Larry, I'm
mhm,
wondering if like you talked about, showing up every day, focusing on the task at hand. The other thing that comes to mind, and I think you and maybe Zach is, I think, is watching, um, talked about pie. I learned about pie: performance, image, and exposure. For those of you that don't know that, it's Harvey Coleman's book. It changed my career, it changed my life, and I recommend it. Even my nephew, that you met, Winston, is reading it right now, and he's 17 years old.
yeah.
And it's about your performance. Yes, you got to show up and do good all the time, but it's also, how do you show up from your image? Are you professional? Are you a collaborator? Are you kind to others? Are you on time? Whatever. But it's
Mm,
your exposure. And so I think sponsorship and mentorship and exposure to people like that, I think, also helps them to see, oh, Larry does have it going on. He is great. So they can speak about you when you're not in the room and when you're not on Zoom. That exposure part of pie, I think, is really
yeah,
important.
yeah.
So I think
I,
we can.
I could agree more, Daphne. I would add there's one more P that doesn't get talked about as often enough, and that P is politics. It is so profound in what we do, in everything we do, even in sports, right? That sometimes it's not about always being the best. It is about the connections. It is about the relationships. It is about the secret sauce of why decisions are made. It is politics is not. I don't know if there's a book that's really going to describe how to navigate politics well enough because they change. But when you've been doing this long enough and you kind of develop this superpower, you begin to smell,
Yeah,
feel, sense politics. And what you do after that is what's instrumental, right? It's if a decision is made and the decision is not logical, give it up to politics, right?
that's
If
right.
it not that it's different than maybe your idea or concept, but if you wonder why something is kind of not on level, yeah, it's probably politics. Now, how we address and deal with politics, I think each situation is different, but it is also you can have those three. Those three have to equip you to deal with the other P,
Yeah,
because that other P is probably, I would say, more than 50% of what you have to deal with, especially if you're dealing, even if you're not in corporate America, even if you're a founder trying to get investments and equity, it's
it's every,
politics is everywhere. It's everywhere.
even in the church. My husband's a pastor, and politics is in church. It's everywhere.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
all right. So great point. So I have a question here. It says, "Hi, Larry. Looking back, what leadership lesson took you the longest to learn, but changed everything once you did learn it?"
Ooh.
Wow, that's a deep.
I so it's a great question. I'm getting goosebumps for that question actually. Um, Being introverted and being diverse, you sometimes I'm 6'4", and I found sometimes because I'm tall and I'm diverse, I found myself over time being smaller to just
Fit
fit,
in.
right? And it took a while to realize that I don't have to do that. In fact, one leader who I totally respect, she said to me on a sidebar in a meeting, she said, "We need your voice, right? You need to find your voice. We know it's in there, but when you're at in these boardrooms or leadership tables, it is about not being so intimidated, and it's not about confidence. It's really finding your voice and feeling comfortable being your most authentic self in the confines of everything we just talked about. And it took me a while to realize it's nothing wrong with being an introvert, but it doesn't mean you can't find your voice. And it took me a while to realize what that meant. And I got to give this person credit. She changed even the way I walk. So when you walk in a room, walk like Elvis just entered the building. And and I was like, "You sure about that? No, you got a swagger about you. Go get that swagger out there. People will notice you, right?" And I'm a pretty humble person. My grandmother would have smacked me in the head to do something like that, right? But the point of having a point, an opinion that's not just saying things that have been repeated in a meeting, but crystallizing your point of view, sticking behind it, um, and being prepared, that's everything. As soon as I found my voice, in some cases I couldn't shut up. It was sometimes people don't want to hear your opinion, right? And being able to sense that was instrumental for me. But this person who mentored me said, "You got a lot to offer. Doesn't matter if they don't like it or not. Find your voice and go out there and give people what's inside you." That
That's
was
great.
the biggest one.
That's great. That's a great point. That's excellent, and it's changed your trajectory, I'm sure, of your career. And yeah, not everything is for everybody. And so if you're showing up as who you are,
Mm,
and someone doesn't like that, then there's going to be somebody who will like that. And don't
yes,
feel like you have to change who you are to fit. Don't get in where you can fit in. Sometimes you need to get in where you can stand out. I mean, Michael Jackson did not fit in. Oprah
that's right.
Winfrey does not fit in, right?
That's
As you
right.
just down list of leaders. So you got to sometimes go, where you stand out and are appreciated.
Mm.
So, Larry, your son, for those that may not know, Dante Jones is Larry's son. He's a member of, well, he was a player in the NBA. Now he's a
Yeah.
coach, Clippers,
For the Los Angeles Clippers, yes.
LA Clippers. So he played ball where in basketball either you win or you lose.
Mm.
It's just, you play until it's a tie, until somebody's winning and somebody's losing. In healthcare innovation, how do you, Larry, define winning? I mean, are we keeping score? Are we winning? How do you define winning? And are we keeping score in a way that will actually matter to people like me, to patients?
Yeah.
And, wow, long question, patients of color
Uh,
who are
yeah.
often ignored?
No, it's a phenomenal question. And I in some of my speaking engagements, I made people aware of things. And I'm going to tell you something that just happened a couple of days ago at the very same dinner I was at in JP Morgan. First of all, the backdrop of healthcare, people need to understand in the US, we spend $5 trillion on healthcare a year. And yet the quality of healthcare in the US is probably, if you were to rank all the developed countries, we're probably in the middle. But if you look at healthcare globally, more than 50% of the world's population doesn't even have access to healthcare. And yet,
50,
look,
50%?
50%, half of the world does not have access to healthcare. And you can follow the population, right? I think only 35% of the world's population is in Europe and US. If you look at China, India, Asia, Africa, Latin America, where the populations are as good or collectively greater, which also most of the people in those populations look like you and I. Um, so the fact that 50% of the world is not getting access to quality healthcare is insane. Another number people need to be mindful of is that by 2030, little more than 15% of the entire world's population, changes by country, will be over the age of 60. So they will be classified as a senior. And in certainly becoming a senior, although 60 might be the new, you know,
40.
50 or 40, um, you're renowned for getting more chronic disease. And chronic disease is not only on the rise, it's actually more complex. We take into account climate. Climate is creating all kinds of problems with health, whether it's upper respiratory issues, whether it's affecting the types and quality of healthy foods we're eating. I would invite you to do some research on overprocessed foods and the availability and cost of overprocessed foods in our communities. I'll tell you, my wife is Brazilian, so when I go to Brazil, I'm always amazed the fact that quality food is actually sold on the street, whether it's bananas, whether it's limes, whether it's fruit. You can get great food, cheap but high quality food for almost nothing. You come to the US and to get organic food, you got to go to Whole Foods.
That's
You
right.
got to pay an arm and a leg for good food. So what do they do in our communities? They give you over processed cheap food and they market it on TV like it's the best thing. And if you don't want to believe it, I ask you, any of your sports fans out there this weekend, while you're watching that football game, count the number of commercials where there's over processed food and where there's healthy food. And I will tell you, you probably won't see one around healthy food. Why is that important? Because you become institutionalized to eating pizza, eating those wings. What does that lead to? Diabetes,
Vascular.
chronic conditions. They literally, it's all a connection. And then I think we're losing when mental health institutions aren't being um, supported. They're understaffed. If at all you can get anyone who's suffering from mental health into an institution or even getting treated. And unfortunately, most of the homelessness you see is due to mental health. These are not people who are just troubled youths. They have a disease that's not being treated. And then you talk about the caregivers, the nurses, the nurse practitioners, even the doctors. They're in short supply and they're underpaid. And I'm this is the one that really ticks me off, and it's why I'm in this industry. was at a dinner, and over this past week, OpenAI introduced ChatGPT for Health. And for those who
Hmm.
need to understand what that is, it's an AI consumer-based model that's coming out, which allows you to put your health records or health information into chat, and it gives you personalized guidance on your health. It's secure, integrates your medical records. It gives you supposed relevant information about your health. And it's designed to complement care or diagnose or treatment. And so we were at a round table, and someone said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And I let everyone answer. And I said, "You know what everyone has? They have one of these. They have a cell phone. So kudos to OpenAI for driving something like this. But you know what everyone doesn't have? Access to healthcare. So imagine being diagnosed with a chronic disease and can't see a doctor.
See, yeah.
So what's the point having access to information if you don't have access to healthcare? So for me, I think we're losing. And I literally believe this is why I'm at Microsoft, is that if we can't somehow lower the cost to serve in healthcare, improve the quality of care around the world, help life science companies bring drugs to market faster, get our data as well as population data into early stage development for drugs, prevalence in clinical trials, and make sure they match our demographics as well as others, right? Make that much more diverse, that we can teach people about. I remember when we used to have healthcare in schools, right? They used to teach you uh, what good food looks like. And so I think retraining our youth on what good health means, whether that's in school or at the barbershop beauty salon. I think there's an awareness to get this disinformation out, erased out there, that I don't know if there's enough people doing that. So to answer your question, I think there's a lot of great innovation, whether it be GLPs and other things, drugs and coming to the market. But, I have friends that suffer from multiple myeloma, and, these specialty drugs are great, but you got to develop a second mortgage to get treatment. Or if you're diagnosed, I was telling someone the worst thing you can have is get a biopsy and have to wait 10 days to determine whether that biopsy is cancerous or not. Those are the worst 10 days of your life, because you're thinking about, do I have my life in order? What if this comes positive? So having rapid access to healthcare, I think, is, let alone lowering it. Yeah, we're losing, especially here in the U.S., if not around the world.
So the technology is there because you know that when you do get, biopsy, AI is able to help the radiologist be even more
Yes.
accurate than before.
Yeah.
But there's a social construct. There's the human element that you're
Absolutely.
saying that we're kind of leaving behind in the
Agreed.
middle of innovation. There's the people. You talk about AI first. What about humans first?
Absolutely, Daphne.
Can
Absolutely.
determine the AI, as opposed to having AI just out there and maybe not care that humans are being treated or having access. I think that's a phenomenal point. And you're a technologist, and
Yes.
you're talking about access. You're not talking about innovation, which is
I I'm
phenomenal.
not mentioning a single technology. I was
Yeah.
on a meeting with my leadership team, and I asked them, when was the last time you had a frictionless healthcare experience? I'll give you an example. My wife had to have a biopsy, so she had to get an MRI, but she had to go see a specialist.
Mm,
So you would think you should be able to get that MRI over to the specialist over the internet.
yeah.
No, you got to get a bunch of DVDs together. And so, like, it's 2026, and we still haven't solved a lot of these integration, access to information problems, which I just think is challenging. But they're real world problems.
Yeah.
And Yeah, I think, yeah, yes, there's some great innovations, but if we were to put points on the board, yeah, it's not quite halftime, but we're definitely losing.
Yeah. When my son graduated from Morehouse, the forgot, president, chancellor, whatever, when they were graduating, they say, you all are going to go out into the world and I want you all to do well. You all are going to do well.
Mm.
But while you all are doing well, he said to all the graduates, I want you to do good.
Mm.
And it's like we're so worried about doing well financially with greater margins and EBITDA and market share, blah, blah, blah. But where's the other half of us that should be doing good as
That's
well?
right.
That's what I
That's
hear you
right.
saying. So I appreciate that. I have another one or two questions. I know we're going to have to adjourn in a few minutes. Um, so AI is transforming diagnostics, as you've talked about in care, but it also reinforces bias. I have a 4-year-old grandson, and as he gets older, whatever books he reads, that's what he's going to know. Whatever we tell AI, that's what it knows, and then it spits it back out to whoever asks questions. As someone who is committed to equity and equality, how do you ensure that the platforms that you guys are building don't quietly make injustice scale? You're
Yeah.
trying to make access scale and information scale, but how do we not scale injustice because of
Yes.
this?
Your question is provocative and it's a very good one. And what I will tell you is the new currency is data, right?
Yeah,
Um, it literally is driving everything. It drives our AI models. It drives decisions on what compounds from a discovery perspective we're doing in healthcare. It drives clinical development. It unfortunately data along with money drives which drugs to bring to market. If data doesn't represent the whole population, there will be only a privileged few who will benefit from transformational sort of drugs and therapies. Um, you can have the right platforms. You can have AI models, which Microsoft is renowned in providing the platforms. But it's the payers and the providers, the clinicians that have to be diligent in making sure the data represents the population. And unfortunately, if the population that is getting access to healthcare doesn't represent the entire population,
right.
that's the Daphne, that's the pain I experience because it is it's all connected. So if you're not insured, you're not represented. If you're not represented, that data that gets resold to life science companies to develop new compounds and drugs, you're not going to get represented there.
Your DNA
And
is not in it.
and
Your genome is not in it.
absolutely, and you therefore you get this um, incredible bias. Some, to be honest, by systemic design. Um, but it is the qualifier for going forward. Look, I remember in J&J when we were trying to solve some of the world's most challenging um, diseases, but those diseases, quite frankly, were in communities that you're not going to make a whole lot of money out of it, right? So I think the pressure, financial pressure on the healthcare system drives the behavior where, oh, let's cure this particular disease state, but some of those, rare diseases with the demographics and population being small, those are not attractive. So and some of those are by demographic, let's be honest. Um, but there's still some diseases out there that I can't believe we're still talking about. Um, but and then yeah, lastly, it's just everything is data. I will say one last thing, um, because it was a discussion the other night, and I think it's true. I have a family of unfortunately I've lost my dad, my brother. I lost my best friend to cancer. At 41, he died of colon cancer. My college roommate, best friend, and when he told me I was working in J&J at the time, I quickly tried to mobilize and get him treatment. And this guy was an attorney. He was educated. It wasn't like he he didn't understand healthcare, but once he was diagnosed,
Yeah.
um, he just developed a stigma, where he just figured he was going to die, right? And it wasn't necessarily true. The access to information about your disease state is it is a life or death situation. And although I appreciate some of what AI is doing and giving people access to information, um, I'm not sure everyone understands that their family history
Yeah.
is uber important to manage. And unfortunately, in our communities, we don't often ask what people die of.
Mm. Really?
Yeah, just like, oh, and what he found out was his dad's side of the family had a history of colon cancer, but he never was a part of his dad's life. So I think as parents, grandparents, managing family health history is uber important because you can see trends, especially in things like breast cancer and colon cancer. Never alone eating habits, but I think that's from a data perspective, that too is actually something we're empowered and we can do.
That's incredible. And Larry, this has been phenomenal for me. I learned a ton. Um, and so I'm gonna get ready to sign us off because this is
Okay.
really, I can't do any more than what you just said. So everybody, we have found out that winning is not about being flawless; it's about being intentional. And we're going to have some leaders with us next month and in April and in March. Wei Wang will be coming February 11th. He is an amazing leader. He's on Fox, CNBC. He knows everything about technology there is to know. Karik, Max Jones, who is my husband, he's going to be a guest. I thought maybe it's going to be he and I might be guests. We'll find somebody who will interview us. But people always talk about us being on our own reality TV show or something. So we're going to have my husband join us in March, and then Karika Weldon, April 15th. What Larry was just talking about as it relates to healthcare and genomics is really, really important. And Karika is leading a charge on how to get the genomes and the DNA from the Caribbean so that drug companies can use it for drug discovery. So I appreciate what's coming up next in March and in April and in May. And we discovered that winning is not about being perfect. It's about, I think, having access. It's about having access to information. It's about doing something about it intentionally. We heard today that real winning in healthcare isn't just faster systems or smarter algorithms. It's accountability, it's trust. It's not just doing well, it's also about doing good and designing technology that will respect human dignity and use that technology to help everyone live. In our circle, the winner circle, we believe that winning is not just about dominating at the expense of others, that true winners build environments where excellence is possible and where access to learning and access to opportunity expands and where progress will not leave our people behind. So, like Dante Jones keeps score in the NBA, are you chasing metrics? Are you chasing meaning? Are you optimizing for your own comfort or are you contributing so that other people can win? This is what winning looks like when people know that they were better because you showed up. I know Larry Jones at Microsoft. Microsoft is going to be better because Larry has showed up. I thank you all for being part of the winner's circle. And if today's conversation challenged you, inspired you, pushed you to thinking, keep it up and share it. Until next time, keep pushing, keep building, and keep winning. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Daphne.
Thank you, Larry. God bless you all.